I think anyone can buy a company. You just have to have money for it. But I don't think anyone can successfully integrate a company.
A Tale of Two Cities, Deals and M&A Integration. Today, we have an exciting discussion with an even more exciting group of panelists to bring their insights to the Hive. Today, we have Stacy Hendricks, CEO Principal at Amplify Global Consulting, Brenton Keath, experienced life science and tech CFO and COO, and Pramod Gosavi, a venture capital early stage enterprise infrastructure and security. The first topic that we'll be discussing is about business changes. Business has changed a lot in the last few years as new technologies, business models, and monetization vectors have evolved. How has corporate development changed, and how has this impacted integration? Pramod, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So things have changed quite a bit in the last 3 years, particularly after COVID. So what COVID did is actually it shifted the power on the incumbent side. So a lot of the large companies actually ended up doing well through the COVID because there was a flight to safety and a flight to sort of large companies with cash balances compared to sort of upstarts. So if you look forward from now on, I feel like all of the large companies are flush with cash. They want to do M&A, but what we are hearing is, most of them, they want to do sort of small acquisitions. They want to get these companies early on. They want to integrate it. I hear from CEOs of a lot of large companies is, they just, a lot of times they actually don't want any revenue because, again, to your point about integration is that, a lot of the integration effort is sort of unwinding what this, company has done, sort of integrating it in your parent company, sort of creating a new product and go to market, right? So what I'm hearing consistently from all of the CEOs is they want to acquire companies early on. It's mainly for that integration effort is sort of unwinding what they've done, and also a lot of times it's sort of they want to change the messaging, they want to change the pricing. Yeah. So I'll just pause here.
Great insights. Okay, Brenton, do you think you can respond to that? Do you have your own insights?
Oh, I do agree with Pramod. I think with COVID hitting a few years ago, companies have had to really rethink the strategy around their business models and what they want to, achieve going forward. Again, as Pramod said, a lot of these larger companies have a lot of access to cash and they don't earn a lot of money just putting in the bank account. So they're trying to come up with different ways to utilize that cash that they have sitting in their balance sheet. And acquisitions is one of the easiest ways to, bolt on, whether it's a new market or a different industry or even a different service line or product that they don't currently have. So I've been seeing a lot of that as well. And then on the integration side, there's a very fine balance between how integrated a company needs to be and should be versus you don't want to disrupt them from their day-to-day. And if the company's performing really well and they're growing, you don't want to change too many things that may impact that future growth.
Stacy, do you have any insights on this one?
What Brenton was talking about not disrupting a company that's doing really well. I think there's a really fine balance there, especially a company that has a very specific culture to bring to the table. And so it's really tough when you are trying to integrate a smaller company, especially into a much, much larger organization that does a lot of these kinds of deals. And there are, really good synergies to be achieved if you can do that the right way. So how do you strike the balance between not disrupting the company, but being able to achieve those kinds of synergies? And sometimes there's a little bit of a give and take with these companies where they have to give up some things that they are a little bit attached to. But I think there's a give and a get there. and being able to really show the target companies where the value is there, and that there's something to be gained by giving up a few things that they may be really attached to. And then a couple of times you may need to kind of give them a few things that that are really important to them, but that may seem smaller. Like a good example is one of the deals that I worked on. The company was based, one of the offices was based in the UK. Company was pretty attached to the tea cart that would come around in the afternoon. And US company thought that that was a frivolous expense, wanted to cut it, but it was really important to that group. And that's a cultural thing. It's a perk that the company really cared about. And while it may seem a small thing, it became kind of a big issue. So I think that there are ways that you can give and get and not squash the butterfly when you're trying to integrate a company into a larger organization.
Opening the floor for any responses to anybody's answers.
I really like the comment that Stacy touched on at the beginning around culture. I think companies are getting a lot more sophisticated and smarter around making sure that the culture of the company is going to fit within their organization. And especially if it's a very large company, you don't want to disrupt the culture of the company that you've acquired. It might be very small, but at the same time, some very difficult decisions have to be made prior to acquiring a company, where there may be some part of the leadership team that are not kind of the culture that you want in the organization. I think companies historically, allowed the founders and exec team that may not have been a good culture fit to stay in an organization. But I think companies, as I said, a lot more sophisticated these days and are happy to make a pretty tough decision to maybe let them go, and then also making sure that you retain the talent that you want to retain in the company post acquisition.
Is everybody ready to move on to the next topic? Good. How's it going, everybody, so far? Good?
Good.
All right. We have been hearing a lot more about tighter alignment between corp dev and integration for many years. However, this has not played out as well as it should have. I'm curious to know from your perspectives, what are some top strategies in making this work, or strategies that you've seen didn't really pan out as well as you think? Stacy, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think a lot of times those two teams feel like they're speaking completely different languages and feel like they have different objectives. They often report up to different people. So a lot of times the corp dev group will report up through the CFO. The integration team might report up through an operations, a COO. And so they're not only separated by reporting lines, but feel like they might be separated in terms of objectives and language. And one of the things that I've found that can be a joinder is really starting to bring the integrations team on much earlier in the process, so even pre-due diligence, and helping have the integration team kind of help start to point out really early operational risks. And I think that during the diligence process is where the two teams can come together and start to align on their objectives. If the integrations team can really be pointing out places that they feel like could contribute to that go, no go decision, where the operational risks, where the cultural risks, that really may squash the value of the company that you're trying to bring in. Additionally, one of the things I think integration people might have a hard time with the corp dev teams is that often the corp dev teams will kind of decide on synergy numbers and commit to that with financiers. And the integration team hasn't had a chance to really weigh in on that. The work stream leads haven't had a chance to weigh in on that. And if you can combine forces and start talking the same language of numbers, I think that's a really powerful combination where your objectives completely align. How are you going to create value with this company? And that's where I think the integration team can offer a lot of value to the corporate development team, because they can kind of point out things that may not be readily apparent to some of the corp dev folks from a logistical or operations perspective. So I think if you can align on the language and align on the objectives, you get a lot more tighter alignment and integration of those two teams at the start of the deal.
Awesome. Brenton?
Yeah, so just following on from what Stacy was saying, so after focusing on M&A and deals for about 12 years of my career early on, I then moved into the M&A integration side. And one of the challenges I faced at the company that I joined was that I wasn't part of the corp dev team and we were not being involved in the M&A process. And after identifying that and talking with various people across the different departments in the company around how we should be integrating the companies, I quickly came to the realization that for me to be successful and my team to be successful in the integration role, we needed to sit side by side with corp dev and be involved earlier in the process to, vet those things that the deal team is coming up with and make plans and put an action planning together so that we know once the deal is across the line, now we can focus on, hitting those synergies, helping the company realize those synergies, or as I said before about the culture, like that was not something the deal team typically looked at, but from an integration perspective, because once the deal is done, corp dev is off the deal. They don't really get involved, so they don't see those challenges that you see in integration. So helping them understand some of the challenges that we would face in the integration is really important for the success of the acquisition and that integration project.
Pramod, very curious to hear your take, especially from the corp dev side.
Yeah, so I think I agree with you. I think the corp dev team and the integration should be under the same boss, but what I've seen like across 3 companies right now is so typically the corp dev people are just not excited about integration anymore. They just want to sort of chase deals, get the execution done. And when it comes to integration, it's sort of a slow process. You always have sort of new people that you interact with and a lot of complications. So they don't love that task. But having said that, I think just to add to what others have said, I think it's very important that, the integration process starts early. And what I've noticed also that it's good for the corp dev team to stay engaged, to learn like what went well, what didn't go well, so that when they are working on the next deal, they can bring in that learnings. Having said that, I still don't know what's the right structure, but I'm seeing more and more that, now they're making as a requirement for the head of corp dev to own integration also, at least sort of a functional borderline, particularly if you just have like professional project managers running integrations, that team rolls up into the corp dev. But having said that, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of corp dev teams just don't love sort of doing the integration work, and that has been a problem throughout.
Curious to know, Stacy, Brenton, have you seen that structure that Pramod references?
Yes, and I think it's actually more effective that way. If you're sitting together physically or virtually and meeting regularly under the same boss and or the same structure, I think that gives the team a little bit more a sense of cohesiveness and those shared objectives. I've sat, side by side with those people physically, the corp dev team physically, and it's so helpful, pre-COVID at least, that we could go and talk to each other about ideas and share ideas, and it not feel like we're talking a separate language or not communicating well. So I think that structure is super effective. HP, when I was working there, HP functioned under one group for a time, and it was separate for a time, and I thought it was more effective when we were under the same umbrella.
Yeah, and I do agree with that as well. It really comes down to the leader of the corp dev / integration team, though. If they don't believe both need to be reporting into that person, And I've seen that before where, they're more of a deal person and they really clearly only care about deals. It's a constant struggle to kind of train and educate them that, you have to take the integration side of what you're working on equally as important. And one of the analogies I kind of use quite often is, I think anyone can buy a company. You just have to have money for it. But I don't think anyone can successfully integrate a company. And so I think that's harder to do than just acquiring a company in many ways.
Right. Next topic. With deals shifting towards smaller tech-oriented companies, there are no conventional back office synergies. What are your views on value creation in these scenarios from a corp dev standpoint and an M&A integration angle? Pramod, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic. This is also something of interest for me. I think, as you mentioned, I think with smaller acquisitions, there is not much sort of back office integration. But when you're doing small acquisitions, you're doing for the team, for the talent, and the technology that they have built. So I mean, the integration has to be slightly different. And what I mean by that is it has to be pulled in the front. When you're looking at this acquisition targets, you need to pull in your HR, you need to pull in the BU that's going to own the acquisition, to just make sure that you're looking at the right people, the right skill set, they have the right product, and also think a lot about how they plan to sort of integrate it, which means where do they sit. So with the smaller targets, I feel like the integration work gets pulled in very, very early. There's not a lot to do on the back end, but a lot of work needs to be done on the front end. And that's also where I've seen a lot of small acquisitions actually fail in large companies. Is exactly that, is that they don't do any work upfront. They make an acquisition, they throw it to the integration team, and then they figure out sometimes it's not a culture fit. They don't like the titles, they don't like the job responsibilities and everything. So I almost feel like with smaller acquisitions, it's best to do like majority of the so-called integration work along with the deal. Like as you are negotiating, you talk to the team, you ask them, what kind of roles they want on the both sides, get a bit of sort of commitment from both the sides, and then you can have a shorter integration process, but you're going to be successful because you have everything sort of decided and negotiated. And what I'd like to do is, I think I'm okay with a lot of the deals sort of falling through that process, because I would rather have the deals fall through the process initially than not be successful while you're integrating. And I can tell you, like when I was at Corp Dev, a lot of the small deals actually will fail exactly for the same reason, because they don't do some of the work upfront. So I'll just pause here.
Just following on from what Pramod said, I think when there are no clear synergies, especially on kind of G&A and back office side of things, as I'd mentioned earlier, there's different reasons why a company will acquire another company, and it could be a new market. So maybe you don't have to have too many synergies. It's just you want to enter into a new market, a new service, a new product. So there's also you could look at it the other way, and there could be some processes or synergies on the other way. So there could be some things that the company that you're acquiring has that you don't have, that you could take from that. So I think it's equally important to be looking at it from that perspective as well. I've seen one of the big challenges, especially in a large organization, is the business unit that is going to own the company that you're acquiring. Sometimes that's not very clear at the beginning, and even getting close to when the deal is being done, I think that's something that probably needs to be thought out a little bit more earlier, so that those in the business unit that are going to own and manage the company that's being acquired is also getting involved in that process as well. Because similar to the integration side, where the corp dev team would say, hey, here's the company we just acquired. Sometimes they do that to the business unit as well, and I think that's where some companies may fail as part of the acquisition process.
I'll jump in too and talk about, you asked how those tuck-ins create value. And I think when we're talking about synergies, most people think about cost synergies only and don't really think about the revenue synergy side of this. And that on a tech and talent or talent tuck-in, I think that's where you have to look and focus. So how are you going to do that? And what's the path to create value from a revenue standpoint? And I think on these kinds of deals, there are several. So part of that could be Brenton, alluded to entering a new market. So part of what the parent company might be buying is they might be buying customers. They might be buying communities, like a development community that's really rich and robust. They may be buying a customer set, and that may be a path to revenue right there. From a technology standpoint, some of the KPIs might be production targets or product development, or even softer targets like a path to innovation. They may be acquiring a team that is leaps and bounds above their innovation team at the current company. And so one of their soft targets may be really creating value through innovation. And so I think we really have to kind of flip the script on synergies a little bit and think about it not only from a cost saving standpoint, but how you generate revenue, how you move forward in the market, how you separate yourselves on the competitive landscape, and how you align the incentives of the management team toward that. A lot of companies will set targets that the target company management team has to hit from a revenue standpoint. And I think that's a really smart move and something that I've seen work really well.
Everybody good with this topic? Next topic?
Nope.
Okay. Almost every function and process in companies have embraced automation and digital transformation. M&A as a function appears to follow legacy methods. What have you seen and what should change? Brenton, we'll start off with you.
I think with any kind of role, there's some level of crossover with AI, and whether it's chat GPT or whatever it is. But I think it's really important, as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago when companies started acquiring other companies, processes have to change. You have to evolve with, where the times are right now. And even there may not be some early adoption on the M&A side or integration side of AI and automation. I think you're going to see a lot of that change very soon. And I don't know about whether companies will be looking into utilizing AI to make a decision. I don't think that would be the right decision just yet, to utilize that to decide whether to buy a company or not. But I think some of the processes that, whether it's on the M&A side or integration side, are definitely going to be much more automated moving forward.
All right. Because we started with that, Stacy, I would love to hear if there's any part of M&A you think, especially integration, that can be automated.
I guess I hold a little bit of an opposite opinion. Having worked with so many teams that are so resistant to any kind of technology in the M&A process, it's really tough when you're working with especially a large integration team that may be massively geographically dispersed in all kinds of different countries. You're talking about people with all kinds of different skill sets and skill levels. So when you're trying to use different tools in an M&A integration, it's like, square peg in a round hole sometimes, trying to kind of force a new tool or a new process onto something that all anybody really wants to use is an Excel spreadsheet. And so that can be really frustrating, when you're trying to introduce something new or kind of integrate using different methods. And a lot of times I've started off with really good intentions to use a new process or technology and ended up kind of falling back into least common denominator, because I don't think we're quite there yet, because of the differing skill sets and knowledge base of the team that are actually doing the work. Right now I'm working with on a healthcare project, And so we've got teams that are working in medical practices. And so this is not a technology integration. They aren't people that do technology every day. And the tools that we're using are pretty basic, but where I've found that you can innovate is in using those tools in really creative ways and working with the management teams, the integration teams, and the finance team to develop kind of custom tools that work with the teams in the way that they work. And so I think that everybody can kind of be their own innovator here, even if the teams that you're working with aren't really ready to accept new technology. That being said, I do think that there are some tools and companies coming out with some very interesting solutions for integration, including Mergeflo. I'm so excited to see what that company does because I think that there are roadblocks to efficiencies in these old methods that we can definitely improve upon, but we need to do it in a way that you can bring teams along on their technological level so that you're not really forcing them to work in ways that they just don't feel comfortable working.
Awesome. Pramod.
So this also a topic of interest for me is, when I was in like 3 corp dev departments, we would have sort of vendors come and sell us a solution, and most of the times, we would always push back. I think one of the big problems that comes from, why they resist any product is because there's a very strong thinking that it's like, courses for horses. So they want to sort of use a sort of net new, start from scratch. Like, why are we doing this acquisition and run like a very sort of a customized process for every integration? So when you buy a tool and the tool tells you to do, in a particular way, sometimes they feel like it's actually holding them back rather than letting them sort of move fast. And also it's sort of holding back on what you can do, what you cannot do. So that has been always a problem with adopting integration tools. But to your point, I think the question on automation, I think that's where I feel like there's a lot of value. And what I mean by automation is things like, regardless of whether you use a tool or you're just doing everything by some other means, I think there has to be some automation like, just sending an email, Slack messages to team members saying, hey, can you update your statuses? Can you tell us what issues you have? Can you, so a lot of the sort of the core sort of communication, collaboration work, as well as some real work should get automated. I think there's a tendency that, people who don't adopt all these tools, they just do everything sort of manual. They have like PMs, they hire sort of external teams, they hire contractors and all of that stuff. But I feel like there should be automation, and automation is a very good, it's a good multiplying factor here is because a lot of times these integrations, they work on the side, people are doing other jobs. So a lot of times you don't have time to sort of follow up, and it sort of becomes like a number 2 priority. So having some sort of automation where, you have some tools sort of pinging these people to get stuff done, like even a simple thing like, a decision needs to be made, like just put a timeline and get things done. I think that's where I feel like they can be a big multiplying factor and a change maker that, again, it doesn't have to be sort of tied to an integration tool. A lot of those integration tools have that, but as I mentioned, I think the problem with those integration tools is a lot of times they force you in a particular process, and a lot of times the teams do not want to use the same process for every integration. So I'll just pause here.
All right. Stacy, you mentioned one way to innovate was to actually use old tools, but in innovative ways. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, I just think that there are so many ways that you can create processes and tools with a team and with a management team. And I think getting stuck in a template or to Pramod's point, a particular tool can limit you. So one of the things that on one of the projects I'm working on right now that I've developed in conjunction with the finance team is this very cool synergy tracker that it's not a tool that I had used before, it existed before, and we've automated a lot of that tool within Excel to manage that process, which is, as any finance team will tell you, painful and difficult sometimes to directly attribute and track synergies. It's not an easy process. And so what can you do on things like that to make it less painful, less difficult? How can you automate that within a tool? So even an old tool like Excel, I think there are ways that you can make those into a process that's less cumbersome for the teams that are actually doing the work. So to Pramod's point, though, I do want to mention that, his point was the automation doesn't have to always be customer facing or team facing. I think that's an excellent point, in that the automation and the time-saving techniques can be on the integration lead and the core integration team, where you all are automating your own processes without having to push a tool or a process on a team. And I fully agree with that as well. I think there are lots of ways that you can automate behind the scenes without having to burden a team that may be very, very uncomfortable working in different kinds of technologies or tools. So I think that there's kind of a happy medium there, where you can get to a point where you're able to kind of work at the level of the team that you're working with, while making your own life easier too, as the person leading the integration.
Thank you. Brenton, I'm curious to know, what tools have you used for integrations, and what have you found has been effective for you?
Yeah, so I've seen a similar situation where getting people outside of the integration team to adopt tools can be a challenge. And I started doing things in Excel, keeping track of all of the tasks that had to be done, how they interlinked with each other. And, you have to do this before you can do that. That's how I started building it out. Then I went to some free project management software. Again, it was very difficult for them to get them to update the Excel file. So I found my team and myself was the one that would update that. And it actually helped us just keep track of the progress we're making. So even though other parts of the organization were not adopting those tools that we were using, they were really helpful for us internally in our integration team to just make sure that we're on track. And you can set it up so you can say, all right, out of the 100 tasks we have to do, we've done 50, so we're 50% complete. That the team outside of integration doesn't really care about that, but it's very important that we have that. And so then there was that free project manager software. Then we moved to a project manager software that the company had rolled out for other purposes, and we were able to use it for our integration projects. So there was some level of, integration, not from an M&A side, but from internally in the company, that we could utilize because we're using the same tool. But again, I found a lot of times we were the ones going there updating the status, because even if you could have it with a click of a button, you could send an email to the person responsible for it. Very rarely did they end up updating the tool that you were using anyway. So, and I don't see that really changing too much, to be honest, because people are busy day to day, and it's more on the integration side that you just want to keep control and tracking of the progress you're making.
And last topic. How should traditional M&A talent stay current and relevant with their skills in today's fast-changing world?
I'm happy to take that one. So for me, it's same as nearly any job you do. Like, you have to stay up with the trends. You have to attend events like this. You have to network, learn from your peers that are out there doing the same thing, because there's little nuggets that you'll gain from other people that are doing the same thing. And the thing about integration is there's not really too many things you need to hide from companies. Like, you're not going to go out there and talk about, hey, we're in the process of buying this company, because they may want to buy the same company, like people out there in the industry, right? Whereas on the integration side, I think you can be a little bit more open and talk about some of the challenges you're seeing, some of the things that are working well, and then just staying on top of technologies that are out there, because the more you can automate the process, speed up how things are getting done, I think the better and more successful you're going to be in your role.
Fully agree with the networking piece. I think especially people that are just starting out in M&A, I think that is just the most invaluable thing, is to talk to people that have been doing that and can talk about what not to do and learning experiences that they've had. I think there's some excellent networking events that are put on by organizations like the Conference Board. There is an excellent, wonderful HR M&A roundtable series, things like that. I think even if you're not an HR focused person, I've gotten so much out of those kinds of events because you're able to dive really deep on a topic. So in addition to the networking, I think some of those events just have a great knowledge base and are absolutely excellent events to attend. I know that there are also kind of bigger courses where you can kind of get certified in M&A. When I was first starting out, I asked somebody leading my team if I should do that and if there's value there. And I think if you have don't have a knowledge base in M&A, that can be a good primer for you. But the real need is to get experience on a deal. There's really no replacement for that. So I think it's a great primer, but not something that, I would rely on to kind of always keep skills up to date. I think it's more valuable to hear from people that have been doing that and to talk to people and also to get to know people that you could reach out to on a deal and say, man, I'm really stuck on this. This is what's happening. I can't really talk about who I'm working with, but man, have you done this before? And give me some tips. And I think networking with folks like that is totally invaluable. There are also awesome podcasts. There's a particularly good one through a company called M&A Science. Keesang Patel leads that, and it's an absolutely wonderful series. He keeps the content really up to date and has a lot of very talented people come and speak on his podcast. So that's something I would recommend. There are also some really good books out there that I think are excellent tools that are talking about kind of the latest in M&A that are available on Amazon. So those are the resources that I personally use, but the networking is definitely number one.
Pramod.
Yeah, just to add to everybody, as I said, I think the integration and M&A job is tough because you're always acquiring sort of new companies, new business model, new products, right? So a lot of times I've seen people struggle with understanding people, understanding products, business model, right? So for them, I think they should it's their responsibility to stay up to date on what's going on. So this conference that I'm attending right now, it's a security conference. So if you're a security company, you should send your integration people and M&A people to this conference. Spend them for the whole week, let them immerse, let them talk to startups, let them, learn about new products. So something like this becomes very, very important because then they are sort of prepared. They know what's going on. They know what to expect. So conferences is one thing, and then other ways to sort of educate yourself and stay up to date is, getting the M&A and integration team involved. If you have an innovation team inside your company where they're looking at new products, they're looking at new business model, I think sort of giving them some exposure to that also helps. So I would say those are the two things that are very important to just stay up to date. Because the challenge is really every new acquisition that you do is something really new, something that, your company is acquiring, something that you have not been exposed to before, and learning about it and knowing it always helps to be successful at your job.
Right. So that ends our list of theme questions. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to elaborate on, talk about, anything?
I think I just want to sort of double down on the automation piece. I think that is something that is
Go for it.
I've seen that over and over again. I think as others have mentioned, I think, we need to really bring in automation because, also I mean, partly it sort of prevents you from doing mundane things like asking people for updates and like pinging them and like even like creating documentation, right? You can use Chat GPT right now to create status updates and everything. So I would love to sort of get more automation in the whole process, and then like save people's bandwidth and time to make very tough decisions. Like if you're stuck at something, let's just discuss about it. But everything sort of mundane and things that needs to be done, like hey, this particular application needs to be migrated. You can just sort of create some automation, make sure like whoever is responsible gets it done, tracks issues, sends an email. So I would really, really love to get automation in this process so that people can focus on more important things.
Totally agree with that. I think spending so much time on especially PowerPoint presentations for executive teams. I mean, I know you can't really fully get away from that, but there are ways to do that in a more efficient way where it's not so manual. And I fully agree. I think the integration team spends so much time usually on updates and status updates when the focus really should be on strategy and on partnering with the work stream leads to solve their challenges and support them instead of updating decks and spreadsheets, which just takes an inordinate amount of time.
And I think the M&A integration process is going to continue to evolve as most things do. And I think by attending those networking events and meeting other companies that are going through similar challenges, I think it's really critical that you don't just kind of come up with your framework and structure around how to integrate a company and just continue to do that same way every time. I think there's going to be little pieces that you can pull out of projects you're working on that you can continue to evolve that integration plan. So just, never give up evolving that process, because you're going to be continuing to learning.
All right. Actually, to that point, one of the interesting, let's call it a data point that I got from one of the conversations I had was that somebody would spend about 20 or more hours a week working on that executive report. Mm-hmm. I'd love to get your response on whether that number sounds outrageous to you. And if it is not outrageous, how break down that 20 hours to me, because to me, that is mind-blowingly large.
I actually don't think that sounds crazy. I've seen that absolutely happen, especially on an uber large deal with 20 or more work streams where you're integrating status updates, getting those in, not on time usually, and throughout the week, and working on a deck that is not automated in any way. I mean, spending so much time aligning boxes and things like that. I've definitely seen that. I mean, on very, very large deals, on multi-billion-dollar deals, sometimes we would have a team that would really, that's mostly what they would focus on, are reports and status. So I think that this has to evolve because the bandwidth is a lot less these days, and the management team doesn't want to see the team spending time on that. And although it looks nice, they do want to see things presented in a nice way. A spreadsheet would work just as well for many of these folks to deliver the message, and they would rather have you spend time solving their hard problems and getting results than spending time on a deck. But I've absolutely seen 20 hours a week on an executive deck before, for sure.
I think it also depends on the leadership team's needs and wants in terms of the visibility and the integration. Sometimes they may not care too much. It might be a smaller company that you've acquired, and it doesn't mean as much as focusing on the core business. So sometimes, I agree. It could be as much as half of your time trying to pull those status reports and exec reports together. So any way we can speed up that process, is much more efficient, is always good.
Yeah, and to your point, Brenton, it also depends on how those decks are going to be, how those reports are going to be used. A lot of times on very large deals, those same decks, without being edited, will go to the board. they'll go to the banks. So they're using those for multiple purposes. So they need them to look a certain way and to follow a certain format and to include all the information and to be obviously to be accurate. But that takes time, and it takes time to present something that the management team wants to be able to showcase in different formats. So I think, to your point, Brenton, it really depends on kind of, the emphasis placed on that and how that information is going to be used. And if it's going to be repurposed, then a lot of times the management team will want it to look a certain way and want you to spend a little bit more time on it.
Thanks for tuning in to another Merge Hive session. Please like and comment to add to the conversation. And if you like content like this, please subscribe to see more panels that we release with M&A professionals like yourself.